Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the last session of the day 2 of the ICNS 2025, the Integrated Communications, Navigation and Surveillance Conference, our primary event for CNS ATM matters. This morning, we covered a lot of ground on topics of CNS services, and we wrapped up the morning plenary part with a session on space-based CNS services. We had the privilege of hearing from key representatives from the space industry, including the European Space Agency, Viasat, Startical, and Ariel. Now, what better way to conclude today's plenary than hearing directly from somebody who has been fortunate and brave enough to venture into space. We have all heard about space-based services, but it's not every day we get the chance to learn about them from somebody who has experienced them firsthand. Well, finding an astronaut to speak about this was not exactly easy, though. It was a bit of a Houston, we have a problem. So, but just like in the movies, we had the European Space Agency that came to our help, and we are really absolutely thrilled to have Luca Parmitano, the lead ESA astronaut, and the European Astronaut Center and Johnson Space Center Liaison Officer. Luca will share with us his unique perspective on space, innovation, and exploration. Joining us live from Houston, Texas, Luca brings with him a wealth of experience. His many roles in the NASA Johnson Space Center include instructor for extravehicular activities, that is spacewalks, robotics instructor, astronaut, and evaluator, supporting crews throughout ground training and flight. And really very relevant to CNS, Luca also serves as the CAPCOM, the Capsule Communicator Instructor and Evaluator, helping new CAPCOM develop the essential skills of space-to-ground communications. Luca has made history as the third European and the first Italian astronaut to command the International Space Station. He has completed 6 spacewalks, totaling more than 33 hours, and he supported over 250 European and international experiments. We are really honored to have Luca with you tonight. So Luca, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this introduction. I have to say that it was hard to say no to EUROCON. You have to know that before becoming an astronaut in 2009, my background is flying. I was a test pilot, and before that, I still am active duty in the Italian Air Force. I was a test pilot, and before that, I was a fighter pilot in the Italian Air Force. And the first time I ever heard about EUROCON was in 2001, almost a quarter of a century ago, when my squadron deployed from Italy to Canada for an exercise in northern Canada, and we had to pass our flight corridors and flight plan through EUROCON, and that was the first time I ever heard of such a thing. So after that, I've had many interactions with EUROCONTROL and EUROCOM. So EUROCONTROL, sorry, I've been talking about EUROCONTROL, not EUROCOM. EUROCONTROL, I had a lot of interactions since then, and so it was really great for me to actually be able to support this event after receiving many years of support from EUROCONTROL itself. I decided not to prepare any slides, but rather do or a presentation, but rather do a relatively short conversation with you about some of the key aspects that we share in our common job of communication, navigation, and surveillance. And I will start with just that. What is the astronaut perspective on these 3 elements that are so fundamental in our job? Let's start with communication. My first experience on the International Space Station is from 2013. So it's been over 10 years since those first 6 months in orbit. I flew from May 2013 to November of the same year. And at the time, when I got to the space station, we only had 2 channels to communicate to the ground. It was space to ground 1 and space to ground 2. We also had only 1 band for sending signals. It was the S band. And you have to imagine that with those 2 channels, we had to manage communication that were about the daily operations on the space station, about any special ongoing operation, for example, EVAs or rendezvous. We had to share that with the daily communication on the Russian segment of the space station, and also with any payload or experiment that we were executing. So it was busy, as you can imagine. Well, it was in 2013 that the program, the ISS, the International Space Station program, upgraded to space to ground 3 and 4, introducing the Ku band in our communication system. All at once, we doubled our capability for communication, and now we could dedicate our space to ground for specific operation. And since then, that has been the standard. We use space to ground 1 for general comms, and then we dedicate it to the Russian segment. Space to ground 2 is the USOS, the American, European, Japanese general communication for daily operations on the space station. And then we use space to ground 3 and 4 for specific operations like payloads or specific activities. And you can imagine how that has really freed up our capability to really perform and enhance our daily life. This is especially true because the International Space Station is truly an international endeavor. So depending on the activity, we may have to talk to any of the space centers on 3 different continents that control the space station. Obviously, I'm talking about MCC Houston, Mission Control Center in Houston, that have the overall responsibility of operation and safety on the space station. The second center that we talk to is Huntsville in Alabama. Huntsville is responsible for the American, US developed side of payloads. So all the science that is directed from the ground for American experiments goes through Huntsville. The third center is in Munich. Actually, it's in Oberpfaffenhofen, but we decided early on that calling a space to ground call sign Oberpfaffenhofen was too hard and long, and so we call Munich instead. And Munich takes care of all the operations that have to do with European payloads or system. And that's the same for Tsukuba in Japan, where they take care of Japanese payloads and systems. And then finally, Moscow. So 5 centers on 3 different continents, which I believe is outstanding, is amazing. And I would like to add that on special occasions, but at least once a year, we have had communication with Antarctica, mostly for PR events, public relations, and exchange of experience. But it's still something that we have done. We have established communication with Antarctica. So really, we've had comms on 4 different continents. The other big change in the past 15 years or more that I've been in this business for communication is the capability to cover our 24 hours with constant communication. Back in 2013, it was pretty common to have lapses of 10 to 20 minutes during the day where we didn't have any communication with the ground. Now, although this was not, it didn't really affect our capabilities of operation, it is always a lot better from an astronaut point of view and even from the ground point of view to have really insight into what is happening and being able to immediately respond to any request of any operation requirement. Nowadays, I believe that at least 90% of our daily operations are covered by communication thanks to the improvements in the TDRS satellite constellation and our capability to relay the signals through the ground segment. And these, especially with the crew now being made of 7 astronauts, and so our capability to execute a lot more activities, a lot more tasks, has really improved our products, our result, our core task, which is science. The space station is a conglomerate of 5 different laboratories where we execute tasks that range mostly from all kinds of scientific experiment, then logistic activities that require constant communication with the ground, maintenance, and those also require constant communication with the grounds. That's why having multiple channels, redundant channels to communicate independently has been such an incredible improvement for our daily tasks and activities. Also, other different kind of communication, not only voice communication, but written communication. Nowadays, we have immediate access to email. This has been a constant improvement through the years. Back in 2013, when I first started flying on the International Space Station, email was limited to about 2 uploads and downloads every day, which meant that in the morning, I would wake up, open my computer, check my email, and I would read the answers to my questions from the previous day. After that, I could go through the emails, write my comments, replies, or questions to those emails that I read in the morning from the previous night. And then in the evening, I would be able to get another check, see replies to my daily queries, and receive more queries, send them down for the night, and then the cycle would repeat the next day. Nowadays, as long as we have communication satellites, TDRS connection, and again, it's about 90% of the time, I have immediate access to those email exchanges. And this also really improves our operations. The coverage of the TDRS satellite is so good that we also have capabilities for internet protocol phone calls. At any time, we can really call anywhere in the world to exchange information, mostly call our family, our friends. And even though this is not operational support, it certainly is crew support and personal support, because regardless of how far you are and where you are, being able to talk to your family and friends is really an incredible tool to improve our mood and our state of mind. Lastly, still talking about video communication, for my 2 missions, so in 2013 and then again in 2019-2020, we had the capability to perform about 1 video call a week. It would have to be organized and starting from the ground. The ground would then connect us on the space station with the caller on the ground, and then we would have, once the connection was established, we had the capability to actually make a video call, which was an incredible improvement already from just pure communication. I was able to see my daughters. Crew members can see their parents, their daughters, their family, their friends, and it's really an incredible boost to our well-being. Well, nowadays, only 5 years after I came back from the space station in 2020, nowadays crews can initiate independently their video calls on the ground if they have connectivity. And this is done in such a way that the system is actually encrypted. And so even medical conversation can happen in that using this system. So really, this is a panoramic of how communication has improved over the years and how our capabilities on the space station have been increased just through simple communication technology. When I say simple, I mean increasing the number of ways that we can communicate to the ground, it has impacted our capability to perform tasks. It has improved our capability to feel for our well-being while isolated on the space station. And the second item I would like to talk about is navigation. Navigation, obviously, strictly very much related to the International Space Station and space in general. We used to travel to the International Space Station from the retirement of the space shuttle until the introduction of the Dragon capsule in 2020. So for about 8 years, we were only able to fly to the International Space Station using the Russian capsule and vector called Soyuz. The Soyuz is a very, very reliable machine, but until 2012, it was based on analog technology, which required 34 orbits to rendezvous with the space station. That's because the analog technology didn't allow for precise computation of positioning in space, in the orbit, on altitude, and so on. And so the 34 orbits were required to adjust the orbit of the Soyuz in orbit from the ground, using ground systems to check the position, confirm it, send the instruction, create the conditions for the orbital mechanics. They're called Oman transfers, to raise the altitude of the Soyuz until it met that of the International Space Station. In 2013, for the first time, the Soyuz was upgraded to a digital machine, and already with that system, we were able to perform a 4-orbit rendezvous to the space station. That translates from a rendezvous of about 51 hours, which the astronauts had to pass inside the spacecraft in a very small constrained volume, to a rendezvous of 6 hours. So, as a matter of fact, I was the first non-Russian pilot to perform a 6-hour rendezvous, a 4-orbit rendezvous in 2013. And since then, this has become the standard for the Soyuz spacecraft. So an incredible evolution. First of all, well-being for the astronauts that were not constrained in a very limited volume during their rejoin and the rendezvous, but also a gain for operations, because you gain basically 48 hours of extra time on the International Space Station for adaptation, for work that can be performed. So overall, very, very important evolution. Today, as a matter of fact, that evolution, thanks to the capability of the spacecraft to incorporate and integrate GPS, GLONASS, and Galileo inside the spacecraft, we are actually capable of performing that rendezvous in only 2 orbits, which means 3 hours. That is almost too fast, I would say, because it requires a lot of operation to be performed quickly and correctly. But that is also been very successful in the past years. So from 51 hours to about 3 hours for a rendezvous, as you can imagine, this navigation system, specifically this navigation improvement, has been fundamental for the astronauts. We use GNC, global navigation systems, on the space station as well. They're very important because they can communicate to the ground the position of the stack of the vehicle, the space station in orbit, where it is, and also the orientation of the spacecraft. Contrary to what happens on the ground, the ISS can fly in any orientation, and it has to be controlled from the ground for specific operations. And so it is important that we have this capability to be able not only to perform those operations, rendezvous, docking, undocking, cargo spacecraft, human spacecraft, but also for safety. The ISS flies at 380, 420 kilometers, and our orbit is generally clean. However, we do have orbital debris that changes, that crosses our orbit by decaying from higher orbits. And in order to make sure that that the astronauts are safe and then the vehicle is safe, we change our orbit using our navigation systems in order to avoid those debris and making sure that we don't create any damage on the space station. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about is surveillance. The space station is not really designed for surveillance. We do have crypto capability to send back and forth data. And I'm talking about proprietary data from experiments or payloads or systems, or personal health data from the astronauts that have to be sent back and forth from the space station to the ground. And so those data has to be encrypted. And I would say that is actually a contribution that goes back and forth from the ground. Our requirements and the requirements from the ground to have better encrypted data and more capabilities has been a constant improvement of technology, both on the space station and on the ground. The last type of surveillance that I would like to talk about is actually Earth observation. Although the International Space Station is not a surveillance platform, we do fly over about 70% of the land on Earth. Our capabilities to take high quality pictures from the space station has been demonstrated by our witnessing and testimonials about a lot of the meteorological and man-made disasters that can happen: fire, earthquakes, flooding, and hurricanes. We have documented and sent down those pictures very rapidly. If we are above a system that's been affected by these events, we can take hundreds and thousands of pictures and download them very quickly to the ground. Even though the space station was not specifically designed for Earth observation, we are an excellent platform with our high quality cameras and windows to do that, and also for inspiration. So I would say that surveillance is also one of the contributions of the International Space Station to the benefit of mankind, or humankind on the ground. Europe, as a European astronaut talking to a European audience, Europe has contributed a lot to all of these systems with this personnel and technology. As a matter of fact, about 50% of the International Space Station was built in Europe and then sent to other countries to be outfitted, but really built in Europe. Columbus, 100% built in Europe. And then through the years of the program, we have had the automatic transfer vehicle, which was the biggest spacecraft at the time to bring any cargo to the International Space Station. And its evolution, the European Service Module, is the system that has brought Artemis 1 to the moon and back. And from then on, ESM, the European Service Module, will provide the power, electricity, and navigation, and so on, to the Orion capsule for the Artemis 2 next year, where humankind will return to the moon for the first time in 60 years. Also, talking about communication capabilities, the European Space Agency will be providing IRIS², the most advanced constellation for communication and encrypted and security within the next 4 to 5 years. And so we're very much looking forward to that being employed. For the future, what are the challenges? The biggest challenge in my mind is going to be the necessary delay created by distance when we travel to deep space, first the moon and then beyond. And in order to solve that problem, which is physically unsolvable because of the speed of light, what we will have to do is probably start thinking how artificial intelligence can be applied to automated system, so that they are more and more independent of support from the ground, and then only intervene in specific occasion, being very aware that the time delays of from a minimum of 3 seconds to the moon up to minutes and minutes of delay if when we go to Mars is going to affect our capability to operate with the crews that push themselves to that limit. So to you in the crowd, in the public, I want to just end this very quick introduction to the world of space communication, navigation, and surveillance by reminding you that your work today is laying the base for the future. And that future of Earth and space is joined not only by the common humanity of what we want to achieve, but also by our common dream of a better Earth, better world, hoping that what we're doing today paves the way for a better world tomorrow. Thank you very much, and I have some time for your questions if you have any.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Luca. I think it was interesting actually to hear that the situation, the level of the communications in the space is not very different than with aviation. Maybe you are more quicker actually in advancing and getting some things quicker than what we do in aviation, but hopefully we'll follow also. So this is the time actually to ask Luca for whatever you wanted to ask an astronaut.
Thank you very much for this communication. Thank you very much for the opportunity that you gave me to ask you a question. My name is Konstantinos Simiakis from EFACEA. I would like to ask you actually if you have experienced any jamming or spoofing phenomenon during your stay in the satellite on board. Thank you.
It's the first time that I hear that question. So congratulations on bringing something new that I've never thought about. I have never experienced. I spent 1 year on the International Space Station between 2013 and 2019, and I was never aware of any spoofing or any jamming on our communication system that was not connected to failures on the system itself. So not caused by external factor. I will tell you though that flying on the Soyuz, the Soyuz uses UHF frequencies that are actually on the limit of the VHF frequencies that we use on the ground. And so when we fly over Europe, we do receive a lot of civilian communication, and especially commercial radios that do enter, do get inside our comms, and it's actually quite funny. You're flying over Poland or over some of the countries in Eastern Europe where we're getting closer to our orbit, and you do hear radio comms entering our official communication system. So even though it's not voluntary spoofing, or jamming, it feels like that way because there is a lot on the airwaves in Europe.
So another common ground between aviation and space. Please go.
Wonderful talk and wonderful presentation about and insights in your daily life as an astronaut. My name is Hannes. I'm with a company called CGI. My question to you would be, as an astronaut, so someone who's flown and operated spacecraft, what's your biggest concern with, or the biggest challenge you see with returning to the moon and staying there for good, so beyond what Apollo did? So what are the biggest challenges in your personal view?
Honestly, the challenges that I see today are mostly political. We have the technology, the capability. What we are lacking, especially in Europe, is a definite direction from our decision makers that we want to be protagonists in this next endeavor, and how we want to do that, how we want to achieve that role of senior partners and not junior partners. For many years, I think the strategy or the chart has been very much bottom up. You have individuals within the space agencies that bring up the ideas and then desire and the will to be part of this incredible next adventure. But we haven't seen the response that we require from our leaders to actually execute our plans and our desires and our ambitions. And when I say ambitions, I'm talking at the European level, to bring our European values to the table of future lunar and Martian exploration, space exploration in general. And I'm gonna finish this answer by reminding our leaders, our decision makers, that if you are not at the table, if you're not at the table of space communication, space exploration, then you are on the menu. And so where do we want to be? The question is for you, for the industry, is for our decision makers, our leaders. Where do we want to be? Do we want to be on the menu, or do we want to be sitting at the table? Because if we want to do that, we need to be senior partners, and we need direction and political decision and decisiveness.
I will not keep repeating that we have a lot of common things with the space. So maybe any last question? I don't know. I know that Luca is very busy. So is there any last?
I can take one more question.
Okay.
Hi, Luca. First of all, big fan. I'm also from Sicily. My name is Gabriele. I work at MIT in the US. So one of the interfaces that we see, we deal with air traffic control problems for space, is that you guys have to launch and we have to close a large piece of airspace for air traffic. But do you see that Europe is going to eventually get more launches, more sites, that then it's going to become a problem in Europe? It is a little bit of a problem in the US when there are frequent launches for conventional air traffic. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm not an expert on launchers, honestly. I'm more of a user and an operator. But from a user and operator standpoint, the orbital mechanics do not really grant launches from Europe itself. First of all, because of the density of the population in Europe. We obviously don't want to launch anywhere that may create any casualty in case of failures, which you have to take into consideration. So that's why we launch from areas that are inhabited, over the water, over the desert, Baikonur, Cape Canaveral, or Guinea, French Guinea off the coast of Brazil. What I do hope and expect is for our European bases, the Italian one in Malindi, or again our base, our European launcher base in French Guinea. What I do hope is to see an increase in our capabilities to create space service from Europe using our European launchers, using our European vehicles, initially maybe a cargo return vehicles, and eventually a human-rated vehicle. That is my expectation. So I would say that I don't see a complication in the European airspace due to launches in Europe. However, one thing that we do want to look at and improve is the idea of space planes. So hypersonic planes, winged, that fly into the edges of the atmosphere and then land after a short flight, basically from one side of the world to the other within minutes. That is something that the future may bring. I know that Italy already has an agreement with EASA and the Italian agency for a spaceport in Italy. I think that is probably an incredible development of the future where we mix atmospheric flight and space flight. And so what I would like to see is more of that, a development of procedural capabilities so that the airspace doesn't need to be blocked for a re-entry of those space planes, but it is fully integrated in an atmospheric system that is capable of taking care of a very diversifying quiver of airplanes and machines that can fly together, sharing the airspace.
Thank you, Luca. Just to indicate on this one that there is actually activity ongoing already in Europe, and there is a SESAR project, and also EUROCONTROL is looking at the issue of closing the airspace, but that's not maybe for the moment. I think I want to really to say a big thank you to you, Luca. You've been really great, and I want to ask everybody to a round of applause for Luca. We do have a thank you that we're going to see how to get it to you, or maybe we'll make sure that you come in Brussels to collect it, actually, look, I will say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would love to come to Brussels. Thank you for your time and your questions. It was an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the evening. Bye-bye.
So very quickly, if I think just to give you some information about the dinner for the ones that they will be coming for the dinner. So there is this map here. So there is the options to travel is with a taxi. There is the bus 12 that leaves from the Bourget. And I think that I'm told that the next bus